Chapter 10. Joachim woke up the next day and opened the 10th door in the magic advent calendar. Today there was a picture of an angel at the top of a church tower. Imperial. It happened in Paderborn at the end of the 13th century, into the little town halfway between Hanover. Whoops, the phone keeps moving. There we go. Between Hanover and Cologne rushed a frisky flock of sheep, followed by two shepherds, a black king, a little girl in a red jacket and blue pants, and an angel with outspread wings. It was early in the morning, and only a night watchman was out in the streets. He called out sternly to the two shepherds who were chasing the flock of sheep through the streets. The next moment he saw the angel and hovering over the cobblestones, and he raised his arms to the sunrise and exclaimed, "Alleluia, Alleluia," whereupon he retreated around a corner, leaving the streets to the godly procession. They stopped in front of a church in the middle of town. "That's St. Bartholomew's Church," said Ephriel. "It was built in the 11th century and is named after one of Jesus' 12 apostles. It is said of Bartholomew that he journeyed all the way to India to tell the people there about Jesus." Elizabeth had noticed something strange, and she pointed at the spire. "There's a white bird sitting up there." Ephriel smiled. "If only that's what it was," he sighed. A few seconds later, what Elizabeth had thought was a bird took off and flew down in a spiral towards the pilgrims. Long before it landed, Elizabeth realized that it wasn't a bird, but an angel. It was not a grown angel, and it was no larger than herself. The child angel alighted right in front of Elizabeth's feet. "Hi, my name is Imperial, and I'm coming to Bethlehem with you." He whirled around a bit, peered up at Caspar and the two shepherds, and behaved very frivolously. Finally, he looked at Ephriel. "I've been waiting a quarter of an eternity." Caspar cleared his throat firmly. "A quarter of an eternity. That's about 66,289 years, or 156,498 years, or more exactly 439,811,977 years, or perhaps even a little bit more. It's not easy to say exactly how long a quarter of an eternity lasts. First, you have to find out how long a whole eternity lasts, and you have to divide it by 4, but exactly how long a whole eternity lasts is very difficult to calculate. No matter which number you start with, eternity will in fact last longer. So one can say that a quarter of an eternity is exactly as long as a whole eternity. Even 1,000th of an eternity is precisely as long as the whole of the rest of eternity. This is extremely difficult to understand, for calculating whole or half or quarter eternities is a matter for heaven alone. The cherub looked offended. "In any case, I've been sitting on top of the church tower for hours." "Very possibly, but that's not the same as sitting there for a quarter of an eternity," said Caspar. To avoid a quarrel between the wise men and the cherub, and not just a quarter of a quarrel, Joshua struck the cobblestones with his crook and said, "To Bethlehem, to Bethlehem." They set off through the town and out along the roads and cattle trails. Imperial leaped in front of the 5 sheep, so the pilgrims were guarded by angels at both ends. They saw many towns and villages, but didn't stop until they came to the old Roman colonial city of Cologne on the bank of the Rhine River. Ephriel had explained that their route through Europe had been planned so they would see as few people as possible. Angel Time says that it's 1,272 years after Christ. They've started to build the great cathedral of Cologne, but it won't be finished for many hundreds of years. Joshua struck his crook on the stones and said, "To Bethlehem, to Bethlehem." Imperial turned around and said, "Wonderful countryside, isn't it? We're going up the marvelous Rhine Valley. There are fortresses and castles, steep vineyards and Gothic cathedrals, dandelions and rhubarb." They hurried along the bank of the biggest river Elizabeth had ever seen. The valley became narrower and narrower, and the mountains higher and higher. As they sped through the beautiful landscape, Elizabeth turned toward Ephriel and asked whether he had met Imperial before. The angel thought her question was so funny he couldn't help laughing. "All the angels in heaven have known each other throughout all of eternity. Are there lots of you?" "Oh, yes, a whole host." "How can you all know each other?" We've had all of eternity to get to know each other, and that's a very long time. Elizabeth had to think hard to understand what Ephriel meant. The angel went on. If you have a party that lasts for 3 hours, you shouldn't invite more than 5 or 6 guests, so that everyone will be able to talk to everyone else. But if the party lasts for 3 whole days, you could easily have 50 or more guests. She nodded. She had discussed this with Mama every year about her birthday. The heavenly party has lasted, said Ephriel, for all of eternity. Elizabeth wanted to know more. Do you all have different names? Well, of course. Otherwise, we couldn't address each other. Otherwise, we wouldn't have been people. Otherwise, we wouldn't have been people either. And Ephriel began to recite all the angels' names one by one. The angels in heaven are called Ariel, Buriel, Ceruriel, Daniel, Ephriel, Fabiel, Gabriel, Hammurabiel, Imperial, Joachiel, Cacaduriel, Luxuriel, Michael, Nariel. That's enough, said Elizabeth. How long would you have to go talking to name all of the angels? Well, I'd have to go on for an eternity. That's pretty good going to remember all those names. With all eternity at your disposal, it's not so difficult, said the angel. Elizabeth felt dizzy. She wasn't going to give up. Anyway, I think it's very clever to think up all the names ending with E-L. Ephriel nodded. God's imagination is just as infinite as there are infinitely many stars in the sky. No angel is exactly like another, nor are humans either. You can make 1,000 identical machines, but they are so easy to make that even a human can do it. Finally, the angel Ephriel said something that Elizabeth hid in her heart. Every person on earth is a unique work of creation. Joachim smiled to himself. It had been so fun to read about the angels. Suddenly he heard Mama on the landing and slid the paper under his pillow. Mama leaned over and saw an angel on a church tower, and then something stupid happened. Again, Joachim forgot that he wasn't supposed to talk about what he'd read. That's the cherub Imperial. Imperial? He's sitting on top of the St. Bartholomew's Church. He's been sitting there for a quarter of an eternity, but now he's about to take off and fly in a spiral down to Elizabeth and the others. Mama didn't say anything to Joachim. Instead, she called Papa. When he came into the room, she asked Joachim to tell him about the church and the picture. Oh, no. Only then did Joachim realize that he'd said too much. St. Bartholomew's Church. Bartholomew went all the way to India and told people about Jesus. But the church is in Germany, in Paderborn or something like that. Mama and Papa looked at each other. I'll check it in the encyclopedia, then we'll find out. When he came back, he looked as if he'd seen an angel or two. He's right. The town's called Paderborn, and there really is an old St. Bartholomew's Church there. They were staring at Joachim as they'd done the time he ate nearly all the Christmas cookies the day before Christmas Eve. Papa took the magic advent calendar off the wall and inspected it. How did you hear about Bartholomew? At school. Is that the truth? Either you were allowed to tell lies about Christmas presents or you weren't. Yes. By then it was so late that there was no more time to discuss Bartholomew. Joachim's most important victory that morning was that he managed to hide the thin piece of paper in the secret box before he ran off to school. When he came home, Mama was there, and she had opened his secret box. She opened his secret box. Mom had done something she promised she would never do. She'd broken a solemn promise. She'd done something that was just as bad as opening other people's letters. On the dining room table were the 10 thin sheets of paper that Joachim had found in the magic advent calendar. He was furious. He was so angry with Mama that he felt like hitting her. You promised that that secret box was mine and that you'd never open it. So you tell lies and you steal too. Then Papa came home. He talked to Mama on the phone, and it was he who said she had to find the key and open the box. They had to find out how Joachim knew so many strange names and used so many grown-up words. Joachim said they shouldn't be allowed to have children. People who tell lies to their children might suddenly hit them as well, he said, and that was against the law. They could at least have waited until he came home from school and asked if he would open the box. Finally, he managed to say that he'd hidden the scraps of paper because he wanted to wrap them up and give them to Mama and Papa for Christmas. He said he'd throw away the magic advent calendar, and then he began to cry. He ran down the hall and slammed the door. He was never going to forgive them. Never. He sat on his bed and he looked at the calendar. But his eyes were so full of tears that the colors slid into one another, and he could not pick out the angels from the shepherds in the field. Everything was ruined. The Advent calendar had become ordinary, like every other calendar. It wasn't the least bit magical. And after a long time, something began to sing in his ears. And the song he heard was Sabet Tebas, Sabet Tebas, Sabet Tebas. It was such a mysterious song that he began to realize that it didn't make any difference whether Mama and Papa knew the scraps of paper existed. Perhaps the Advent calendar was so full of secrets that there was enough for the whole family. He had still not told them that he had met John. That was something he had kept to himself. There was a knock at the door. Joachim didn't answer, but after a little while Papa opened it cautiously. "It's true, we did something stupid." Then Mama came. "Can you forgive us?" "Maybe." Nobody said anything. "Did you read what was on the papers?" "I suppose I did, but you see, I don't know which piece of paper came out of the calendar first. Maybe you could show us. Maybe you'd read it to Papa." Joachim considered carefully. "Well, all right." In a way, he was a little relieved. From now on, he would not need to hide anything. Besides, he'd be able to ask Mama and Papa if he read something he didn't understand. From now on, the magic Advent calendar would belong to the whole family. That's the end of chapter 10. Good night.